Fair warning, there will be flashing lights and brief depictions of gore in this video. If that's not your thing, I'd recommend sitting this out. A film, TV show, or video game's visual quality is typically used as a signifier for how good that piece of media is. And to be fair, it is generally a good measure of quality. If a company can afford to put this much effort into the visuals, it stands to reason that they put the same effort into the controls, dialogue trees, and every other part of the experience. A game's realism can draw players in and make them feel like they're participating in something real. A game that looks good has to be good, right? But it is for these reasons that I find Cruelty Squad, a game I'm sure you've never heard of before, such an interesting game to talk about. Cruelty Squad is a tactical first-person shooter, which prioritizes player choice over anything else. I don't want to beat around the bush. Cruelty Squad is an ugly game, and it is, without a hint of exaggeration, one of the best games I have ever played. Even if you can get past the visuals, the control scheme is much harder to process. The user interface is poorly communicated, and the art looks like the artist was trying to make everything as grotesque as possible. Walls have faces. People are angular and sharp, and the health icon is a large, pulsing mass of goop that takes up an excessive amount of screen real estate. And then there's the border. It changes throughout the game, but the one you start with is this alien metallic pattern, another one being green and rusted, and another still being pale and fleshy. You cannot turn the border off. Right off the bat, technically before you even start the game, Cruelty Squad refuses to pull its punches. Its Steam description reads, "An immersive power fantasy simulator with tactical stealth elements set in a sewage-infused garbage world." It's funny to me because of how ironically accurate a description it is. As you play through the game, though, you begin to realize that description doesn't just apply to its looks. The game begins with the protagonist getting a call from a strange-looking man, an odd, disturbing track playing in the background. The man over the phone offers the protagonist a job as a wet worker, someone tasked with assassinating designated targets for their company, the Cruelty Squad, and this man will act as our handler. While the handler talks, we see a man outside the protagonist's window, gunning people down in the street. An event the narration doesn't even comment on, but that sets the tone for this game expertly. Death is an important concept in the world of Cruelty Squad. This is presumably due to how low the value of life is. When the player dies, they are quote-unquote genetically recombined at the low price of a few $100s, something supposedly everyone who can afford a genetic recombinator can do. Interestingly, there are NPCs, or non-player characters, that you can talk to during each mission. A few state that they'd like you to kill their bosses because of a few grievances they have with them. Due to how little it costs for someone to be revived, they likely mean this genuinely. However, there are a few NPCs in the game who don't come back when killed. They'll stay dead permanently, even when reloading the level later on. This is an intriguing touch for the developers to add, as while most of the characters in the game are practically immortal, these characters being able to die permanently is heartbreaking. Just like death, money and transactions are seen as an almost primeval force in the world of Cruelty Squad. Even this world's creation myth refers to the beginning of life as transactions, the act of giving and taking away value and meaning being given an oddly clinical connotation. Throughout the game, as your handler tells you, you are sent after the 1%, the wealthiest of the wealthy, when they mishandle their employer's money. Fascinatingly enough, there is also a working, real-time stock market in the game that represents in-universe businesses which the player can actively invest in. When the player kills the CEO of one of these companies, that company's stock value will plummet, which provides a nice bit of environmental storytelling. Now, I think we need to talk about the targets you'll be going after. Embezzlement, wasting funding on Chunko Pops, making astronauts' journey to space just too safe, and being a little too rude on the company email chain. All these and more are reasons you might end up on the Cruelty Squad's hit list. But the thing I find most interesting about your list of targets is that, while some of them arguably deserve their fate by being actively malicious to other people, Many of them don't. The best example of this is the target of the level, Mall Madness. We are tasked with assassinating a governor by the name of Bill Gurney because he is planning to tax the rich. When he is killed, the value of every stock, even ones that dropped to zero, begins to rise exponentially, showing exactly who Gurney's death was meant to profit. Cruelty Squad is an ugly game, and I'm not going to dispute that. It deals with ugly topics in an ugly, brutal way. It talks about death by having you experience it, both by killing others and being killed yourself. It talks about money by making the player actively participate in the economy that is killing the world. This is a game where a casino level is themed like a sewer, where organs can be traded for money, and where a gun exists that can do more damage based on how much money you have invested in the stock market. And I think that's the point. Many games, especially those released in the late 1990s to the early 2000s, could be called ugly, such as the original Half-Life, Deus Ex, and Quake. Cruelty Squad has had the benefit of nearly 25 years of technology to work with, which makes me believe that this style was intentional. Ville Kallio, the game's creator, has done several artworks in the past. Ville has a knack for creating surreal, hypnagogic, and often creepy artwork. When you look at them, it becomes obvious where Cruelty Squad got its unique art style. I tend to have a hard time convincing people that games like Cruelty Squad are just as good as most games out today, even though it doesn't look nearly as good as they do. I don't expect this to change many minds after all, especially since most people left after the epilepsy warning or left somehow developing epilepsy after watching footage of it for too long. But I'm hoping, at the very least, that games like Cruelty Squad become more commonplace, where games don't have to look good to be good. Thank you.